From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, Jobs Day, July 2nd, almost 4th of July weekend, and you're listening to the HPS Macrocast. I'm Meghan Pennington, in for Tony Fratto this week, and I'm here with John Fagan and Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners. Hey, guys. How's it going?
Excellent.
Great.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Meghan.
So good to be with you guys again. It's been a while.
Indeed, it has. There's been a lot going on.
Yes. Well, I think we had really good jobs numbers, and I'm going to say it's because I was going to be on the Macrocast.
You've brought your good luck touch here. So,
good luck charm. Well, do we jump right in? Do you guys want to walk us through what we saw this morning?
Yeah. So the establishment data that comes from individual companies. They report to the BLS how many people they hired or fired. So 850,000 people got a job in June. In the private sector, it was 662,000. So the government did a lot of hiring too. They hired 188,000 people. The bulk of these were in the leisure and hospitality, 343,000, which is exactly what you would logically expect. You know, we shut down restaurants and we're reopening them and hotels and things like that. So the market kind of consensus was for 650,000. So this was a beat, and it's a good sign. You can never criticize 850,000 jobs, you know. Though the household data, which is where we get the unemployment rate, that one was a little more noisy. And from a statistical standpoint, that one is a little from month to month. It's less robust. They survey about 200,000 people. So you can get some kind of weird data from month to month. And in that, it showed that the number of unemployed increased by 168,000 and the number of employed decreased by 18,000. And also 22,000 people dropped out of the labor force, so that and all that results in the unemployment rate going up to 5.9%. I think, you know, from a economics standpoint, it's more important to pay attention to the 850,000 jobs rather than the kind of the noise of the household survey. You know, the market took this very positively, kind of as a Goldilocks scenario where we're creating a lot of jobs. But the fact that the unemployment rate went up a little bit gives the Fed, cover to remain as dovish as they have been thus far. John, did you see anything from a market perspective?
Yeah, if you had to take the markets just at face value here, if you didn't see the number at all and you were just looking at the markets, you'd be saying, "Oh, disappointing number," because the dollar is off. And if you're looking at the macro stuff, the equities are still upbeat, but they probably would be anyway in either circumstance. For equities, it's a win-win. If growth is good, that's great, and certain economically leveraged companies and sectors go up. But if growth is lousy, then the Fed is going to be on full blast, accommodative forever, and the tech stocks and the more those kind of aspects of the equity market go up. So leadership changes in the equity market, but it seems like the S&P 500 is just a heads I win, tails you lose kind of approach. So leaving that aside, if you looked at the dollar and treasury yields, you'd probably say, well, that might have a pretty light number. We saw the dollar come off. It's down 0.3% in a broad dollar index. We've got the 10-year yield coming in about 1 basis point, which isn't exactly a storm and rally, but this is after a really long rally that's occurred over the past month or so in longer dated treasuries. These yields had been kind of range bound and sideways. Right. After the spring upside, the steepening of the yield curve that was premised on this reopening and growth story. And then it kind of started treading water. And then after we got the May non-farm payrolls at the start of June, even though the number was pretty big, it was less than expectations, and yields really started to come in, and doubts began to percolate around the Delta variant, what that might do to the reopening and so forth. There was also legislative drama around the infrastructure bill and a sense that maybe the Biden administration is going to get a relatively small percentage of what they want in terms of fiscal spending here. So all of this kind of clouded the growth outlook. And 10-year Treasury yields were coming into this number at like 1.44%. That's, down toward the very lowest part of the range, and they're still rallying further after this number. Which
might be another reason that the equity market goes up, because you can't get any yield in the bond market, so you got to buy stocks.
Yeah, and I think that Brendan really hit the nail on the head when he said that because this number is such a mixed bag, it's enough ammunition for the doves to fend off the sort of hawkish charge that we've gotten over the last couple of weeks.
Now, the Delta variant reminded me of something I think you all talked about last week or last month. Brendan, I think in the household survey, there was something about folks who were saying they couldn't work, or they something like 7 or 8 million people said they were unable to work because their businesses or their employers had lost business or had been closed. Do we see any improvement there?
Yeah, massive. So one of it is part-time for economic reasons. That means you want a full-time job, but you're only able to get a part-time. That decreased by 644,000 people. And the reason behind that was slack work or business conditions. So business is getting better. They're hiring. They don't need to have people work. They want you to work full time. But the big one is they say part time for non-economic reasons. So that would be you're scared of the virus, your kids aren't in school, things like that. That is still going up. So there's 20.3 million people that are part-time for non-economic reasons, and that increased by a million, or 1.177 million in June. So those are the things that the Fed is pointing to, and it also does kind of make sense. The Fed should stay on hold really until September, because A, kids will be back in school in September, and B, all of the unemployment extended extra benefits run out. So we are seeing some states have shut them down, but everybody loses it in September. So it does kind of make, from a simple logical standpoint, to wait until the economy has found its more normalness to see what your long-term goals should be. But also, while we created 850,000 jobs, that leaves us still 6.3 million short of where we were before the pandemic. So there's still a lot of people that need jobs.
So and one of this would be like a big number, right? But we're just trying to claw back to where we were.
Yeah, 850 is great, but we really need to be doing $3 million a month.
And it's one of the things that we talked about in recent Macrocasts, the way that the Fed is orienting themselves toward the labor report with a specific focus on equality and on the lower income strata, minorities, and other groups that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. It's something that Chair Powell brought up in some of his recent remarks. And when they're defining substantial further progress, which is that's their magical formulation about when they may or may not taper, they've got to see substantial further progress toward their goals of full employment and price stability. What that progress is still yet to be defined.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that Chair Powell may have given us a hint when he specifically started referencing some of these subcategories within the labor report that break it down by race, break it down by gender, break it down by income segment, and so forth. And those have a lot more healing to do, unsurprisingly.
Sure. Well, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think that those subcategories are going to be driving some of the conversations we'll see on the infrastructure deal, both in the bipartisan piece, but then really more in that Democrats only, like human infrastructure, caring economy package. I think you can see, I can imagine that especially Democrats are going to be saying, we have a lot more work to do to get people back to work and feeling comfortable and able to participate in the workforce as they'd like to.
Exactly.
One thing
in terms of the unemployment rate, they report the U6, but there's lots of different measurements. So the broader measure of unemployment, which is U9, is just slightly below 10%. So there's still a lot of people out of work.
One thing I noticed, I read this morning, Mark Zandi at Moody's had a quote in Morning Money where he said, there's been this conversation about ending unemployment benefits so that people start looking for work. And he says early evidence suggests that ending expanded unemployment insurance early in some states has had only a small impact on the job market, at least so far. This is based on Google Trend searches to see if job search intensity in states that ended expanded unemployment insurance is greater than in those that haven't. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, so far there just haven't been a lot of hard data to show that it's created, it's forced people back to work. And part of that too does have to do with the states that, a lot of the states that dropped it are a little more rural states, which it could be a job mismatch too, where you just can't get to it. But there's not overwhelming evidence that the $300 extra a week is keeping people from working.
Right. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine that $300 a week is like making people feel flush with cash.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just that psychological element too. I mean, this is the first, this is a return to summer. Pandemic restrictions are basically rolled back. And, people have done a lot of soul searching and thinking about their career and life path in the last, 16, 18 months. And so it's not surprising that people are not only changing houses, but thinking about changing jobs, changing careers. It's just an unprecedented time. So lots of cross currents.
Actually, a lot of that. And Brendan, I think you mentioned in the hospitality and leisure industries. I mean, on one hand, like even here in DC, you talk to restaurant owners and it's like they need people, they need staff. They can't, we're back to full capacity, but they need folks to be able to keep their restaurants and bars open. But then that was part of the biggest expansion in the jobs numbers this month, right? Hiring in hospitality and leisure industries.
Yep. That was 343,000. So basically half of the private jobs were in leisure and half hospitality.
So we have to imagine that some people are like really embracing no masks and going back to life as usual, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm up in Massachusetts and it's a normal Cape Cod summer right now.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing. Now, so what do we need to see for the rest of the summer? What kind of growth do we need to see? What kind of numbers do we need to see to feel like we're going to continue the progress to I know we need more, but do we think we can continue going up? Like these job numbers can next month, can we expect something of the same? Do we just hope?
Yeah, honestly, you would expect July where, the real summer jobs start to be much bigger. I think you would probably expect it to be double or triple in the best case scenario.
Okay. Well, let's cross our fingers.
And back to school is going to be really pivotal. The number of people, particularly women, that are out of the workforce or have to be on specific schedules and so forth, because it's, the studies have shown just how much having the kids home is impacted the working life of a lot of adults. And, to the extent that schools are going to be reopened in the fall, that may be another threshold event.
Schools are going to reopen. We have a lot of work to do on childcare.
Yeah, and actually on that front, we have very good evidence. So Connecticut did a great job. Their governor, Ned Lamont, fought for the kids and he fought the unions and he got schools to open in September. So the economies of New England are relatively similar, but Connecticut has far less women out of the workforce because of COVID, because their kids were in school the entire year than the neighboring.
Interesting. So isn't that interesting? I didn't realize that. I mean, I know that we have just like historic lows in women's participation in the workforce right now. And, from schools being, hybrid or virtual. And then of course, childcare capacity is always a problem, but that's really interesting. I didn't know that. well, I think that the focus on especially getting women back to work is going to continue. I mean, it some of the numbers are it's really depressing. All right, well, why don't we take a break and we'll come back and talk about infrastructure.
On the first Friday of every month, HPS analyzes the latest jobs and labor market data in a digestible format. Sign up for our reports at hamiltonplacestrategies.com or on Twitter at HPS Insight.
And we're back with the HPS Macrocast. I'm Meghan Pennington here from Hamilton Place Strategies with John Fagan and Brendan Walsh of Markets Policy Partners. So, guys, infrastructure. It's infrastructure week for like the 900th week in a row. But it's like the talk of the town, even though the Senate was in recess. The House was here. House even passed an infrastructure bill yesterday with it was the water infrastructure and surface transportation bill. Pete DeFazio moved a bill through the House. I think it earned 2 Republican votes. But, you know, we're going to have a big push in July, even though I think these negotiations could go all the way into the fall and maybe even into like the end of the year. But I think these next couple of weeks are going to be the next big moment, right? I think we'll have an idea of where the chips going to fall on this bipartisan deal. Will it stay together? I think last week somebody said it'll fall apart 77 times before it comes back together. It probably will. But, you know, I think we'll come back from the 4th of July holiday, I guess, you know, a week and a half from now. And I think we'll start to see something about, you know, what are Pelosi and Schumer and President Biden going to do? What bipartisan deal can they move with McConnell? And then what's going to be the timing with this reconciliation package? But
yeah, what's your base case, Meghan? While we've got you on the spot, let's hear your prognostication.
Well, so I am always foolishly optimistic, and I do think that the bipartisan package will come together. I agree with Tony's logic from last week. I think he hit the nail right on the head. He said that both parties need the bipartisan deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Need it because they need to say, look, we came to the table, we negotiated, we are not going to just add on to the deficit for the sake of, you know, expanding government, but we think that there are some really important hard infrastructure things that we need to do for economic growth and recovery. And, you know, we came to the table and we worked out a deal. And then the Democrats went off and did their thing. And you know, they put through all kinds of spending into a package and they jammed it through, you know, without using regular order. And look at, you know, they took their ball and they went with it because they didn't want to play with us. And then I think Democrats will say, look, we came to the table, we negotiated, we were the good faith partner, and the Republicans simply wouldn't meet the needs of the American people. And so we came together. We decided that we had to act on getting women back into the workplace and making sure that we're doing something about climate, you know, expanding broadband, like doing all of those bread and butter domestic issues. So I think the real intrigue will be how much do the Democrats fight with each other?
I agree, especially in the House.
Yes.
And fight each other over the bipartisan bill or about the reconciliation bill, or both? Really,
the reconciliation bill. Now they'll fight over the timing. I mean, this timing thing is going to be such a delicate dance. And President Biden kind of mucked it up last week and said, like, you know, I'm gonna sign both things at both packages at the same time. And then Susan Collins said, "Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know. You know, this is terrible." And then we had this whole like dramatic thing, and then President Biden had to walk it back, and like now here we are. So I don't know how the timing and like whatever agreement will work, or we can like tell the progressives that we're doing the reconciliation bill at the same time, but tell the Republicans we're not. I don't exactly know how those mechanics are going to work, but the reconciliation bill it's not like all the Democrats are going to say like, okay, here we all agree. It's just not going to happen that way. I mean, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are not going to have the same idea as the squad. Now,
Yeah, I agree.
I think people overestimate the impact the squad has on where the bill will actually go in the House. I think Nancy Pelosi has a very strong hold on her caucus and will, she is in charge, and the stuff that will end up there will be there because she wants it there. But yeah, I think that will be, God, even in the Senate, you're going to have Elizabeth Warren and Joe Manchin are disagreeing on how big that package should be. So
what about the revenue? Do you think that they're relatively close? It seems like the 15% minimum tax, the OECD, 130 countries came to sign on to it yesterday. This thing has momentum. That is going in the bill. The corporate tax increase to whatever is going to be in the reconciliation bill. And, who knows what's going to happen with SALT. They might have to, play let's make a deal on that. Where do you think the revenue ends up?
I really don't know. So we're at 21% right now, right? Corporate tax rate. And the OECD announcement, I think we'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but because I think there's tons of implications and like, what are you going there's a lot of work that has to be done for that agreement to hold in other countries and make sure that we're not having our lunch eaten out in the global marketplace. So like that is, one thing, but in the reconciliation package, I'm not sure. I don't know what Joe Manchin's number is on, I think probably 20, like he's, 25, like he'd be fine. I think that I'm not sure. I would not want to guess. And I think that anybody that claims to be able to read Joe Manchin's mind is a fool because, I think he does. I just don't think anybody can read his mind. But I guess I don't have a good answer on that. I really am not sure how that will come together. Same with SALT. It's going to be hard for some of the Democrats to make a case on what to keep and where to go. I don't know that there are the tax code is really obviously complicated, and I don't know that there are too many members that are like super, I don't want to say smart because that's not right, but they're smart, but like they're not like tax attorneys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They have really good tax attorneys that work for them, but I don't, it's hard to know where they're like principle on taxes because it probably is fluid based on whatever agreement is materializing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Certainly the fallback reconciliation approach is there if they need it, if there are defections and they can't seem to get that delicate dance right. At least they can say that they got close. Right. But yeah, the base case seems to be the two track package, however they sequence it. And on the other side of it, having at least some revenue through the reconciliation process. I think one of the questions that, when talking with industry specialists in infrastructure, the legislative part, which is obviously the focus right now, that's, it's not necessarily the easy part, but I think some people would characterize it that way. Once you've actually appropriated the money, then how do you turn that into an infrastructure campaign? Like we have not had an infrastructure policy for generations in the United States. The infrastructure policy was give money to the states and have them fix stuff that needs fixing. And the state legislatures and the state, and the governor and so on and so forth, they're the ones that know where this money should go. The Biden administration is going a different route. They're trying to create something that does have a federal mandate, whether it's, unified standards for grids, whether it's the electrification of the roadways and so forth, and also an equity goal, an equity component, understanding that infrastructure has to help disadvantaged communities and so forth. You can't do that if you're just dumping money at the state level, which is what they always did. You need a federal apparatus of some kind to be able to drive a federal infrastructure program. At least, this is what we're hearing from our contacts in the industry. They're very focused on that idea. What does that look like? Who knows, right? Infrastructure bank, that plan has been around. Lots of other countries have them, or an infrastructure office in the West Wing, something that looks like Operation Warp Speed for infrastructure. It's a very challenging thing. It hasn't worked particularly well in the past. We saw the, Build America bonds not really transform America, even though those were pretty large numbers. Lots of roads got fixed, but it wasn't exactly a great leap. And so I think that when thinking about it's obviously we're all focused on the legislative aspect, but down the road, understanding how this money actually gets spent and how it's going to be deployed and where it's going to be effective and really get the most traction is going to be for, the analytical community and the financial community, very important. really important.
It's you're absolutely right. And I think it's interesting always to hear from whether it's advocacy communities or industry or any third parties that when there are big negotiations like this happening, you always have people that are out they're saying like, hey, wait, but as you're doing this, you have to think about how it's actually going to, like, when the rubber meets the road, the way you're writing this bill is really important, because if you want it to build X, you've got to do it this way. And I think sometimes Capitol Hill and like staff and even like Washington people like us can be like, oh God, we can't think about that right now. We're just like trying to get a bill done. Just be happy when it's signed and like it's official. And I think like both sides annoy one another about their attention, whether it's like they're the third party stakeholders, like their attention to the detail. And then like the people who are actually trying to get it done and just trying to work the politics are like, give me a break. I'm just trying. If I worry about that right now, nothing will move. So it's that natural tension that I think happens on I can't even, it just, I kind of chuckle, like thinking back to my time on Capitol Hill. It's just that tension is always there. And hopefully the Biden administration is doing the planning that you talk about. And the great thing is people that go and work in the agencies really love the details of this stuff. So, you have to hope that there is a plan inside to like get the bill across the finish line and then like actually go do it. I mean, my gosh, I think there are still some American Reinvestment and Recovery Act like road signs somewhere, like in like Tiger Grant project.
Yeah. One of the things I saw at Treasury, and I saw this, the anybody who works at Treasury, the minute you walk in the door, you really understand, it brings to life the idea that personnel is policy, and understanding that, if you have, when I was at, I talk about this a lot, when I was at a hedge fund with Brendan, we'd come down to DC and meet all these Washington, DC officials and say, we'd want to know about a particular policy. And we would say, what are your thoughts on this policy? And they would tell us their thoughts, very erudite and well thought out and that sort of thing. We'd walk away and say, well, they've got a great plan. What we should have been asking them is, how many people do you have working on this policy? Where are their offices? Are they hiring? What's the budget look like? That institutional machinery behind any policy is necessary. And so when you look at infrastructure, obviously it's spread across a bunch of different agencies that don't work together particularly well, let's face it. And if you have basically the transportation, energy, if you have these diffuse institutional arrangements that are at the top of this campaign, does it outlast a presidential cycle? And I saw people that really had the experience in infrastructure, when they were connected with the Obama administration and they walked out the door, and the institutional knowledge had to be, there wasn't really a good foundation of institutional knowledge in people that are spending their careers in government doing infrastructure in the same way that a centralized body of some kind could allow. That repository of institutional knowledge and being able to attract the bright staffers and hires that make this thing go in the long term.
Yeah, you got to have people that like know where to find the files.
Yeah, right.
Oh man. Well, on that cheerful note, why don't we take another quick break and we'll be right back and talk about this big global tax agreement.
Hamilton Place Strategies, HPS, is an analytical public affairs consulting firm with offices in Washington, D.C., New York, and California. HPS uses substantive analysis to understand complex topics and create public affairs tools to explain issues to target audiences and reach critical stakeholders. We achieve our clients' goals by enhancing understanding of issues, products, and companies, and ultimately improving outcomes. Learn more at hamiltonplacestrategies.com or follow us on Twitter at HPS Insight.
We're back on the HPS Macrocast. Let's talk about this big announcement yesterday from the OECD. What is it? Something like 130 nations agreed to a blueprint. So for multinational corporations to pay what is they have deemed an appropriate share of tax to wherever they operate, not just where they're located. So this is a really big deal, right, guys?
Yeah, it is a really big deal. It's certainly something that the Biden administration and Treasury Secretary Yellen have put front and center in their revenue and pay fors. This idea that there shouldn't be a global race to the bottom, that it's damaging, and the fact that this was so widely accepted, I think, really speaks to the leadership they've been able to exert on this particular issue. There are always going to be holdouts. There are lots of milestones to go. The G20 meeting in October is another big milestone. Certainly, the ability of the U.S. to pass a 15% minimum tax through Congress, kind of got to have that too. And then along with the European Union, they have to do things unanimously. There are holdouts, including Ireland and Hungary, that are trying to, ask questions about about this particular policy.
I guess that's the part I don't get. Doesn't it just take one country to blow this whole thing up?
Right?
I mean, you don't actually have to. You just be based in Ireland. Like if Ireland doesn't join, it doesn't really matter whether it's 130 or 270. You can still go to Ireland.
Yeah, there's a lot that has to be done. Is it? Do they have to have 100% solution? You don't think so, but you'd need Ireland, right? You need the EU to come in together. If the EU is out, and they have very challenging decision-making processes and the need for unanimity and so forth. It's a big issue.
So how will this work? Who's going to go talk to the Irish government and try to make this happen?
Well, I'm sure the other countries in the EU are going to be front and center and in the discussion. Certainly the Biden administration is likely to engage. The Treasury is going to be engaging behind the scenes. No question about that. It's a process and there are lots of miles to go, but the progress they've made so far, you got to say it's pretty impressive.
Do you think that there are incentives that the other countries, that the US and other countries can offer to Ireland to get them to come along?
Well, surely there's some degree of carrot that they can dangle, but it's not clear necessarily what that would be. This is there's a multipolar moment that the Biden administration is enjoying. They've got a lot of political capital that they've got to deploy on the global stage, and I think that they're going to be making their case very forcefully that this is the time to come together, make it worth everybody's while to engage on a global stage and set some minimum standards in this and other places as well. And that's probably where they'd focus on the other kinds of sweeteners and whether it's investment, whether it's other kinds of economic engagement. Right. A robust dialogue, I'm sure, with.
Well, and it's a remarkable given the global sensitivities with countries like China and Russia. The fact that 130 could come along and at least find some agreement is a pretty big deal, right?
Oh yeah, that it is, and they're certainly not going to be resting on their laurels though. So miles to go.
Sure. Well, I guess we shall see. When do you think? So, like, what's the timeline like on this stuff? I mean, I guess we've seen. I think the Biden administration is making a big deal, and certainly, as you mentioned, Secretary Yellen has had some statements that have come out, and they're kind of saying, really like amping up that this is an important agreement. But now, like, what comes next? Is there any forcing mechanism on? Well, like you said, I think you mentioned there's another meeting. Did you say in October?
G20 in October, yeah, and the U.S. has to get 15% through Congress, and then the EU is probably going to be behind that. I mean, we've seen the EU's glacial processes, but those are two of the big ones. Get consensus at the G20, and prior to that, have the U.S. Congress pass that 15% minimum, which would assumedly be part of the reconciliation bill.
Yeah, we know that's just it'll happen, no problem. All right, guys, should we talk about what we have to look forward to in the next couple of weeks before we wrap up? What do we have coming our way?
It's a relatively quiet week. Bank of Canada and the Reserve Bank of Australia hold interest rate meetings. We get the Fed minutes from the last meeting, so we'll get a little more clarity on whether they talking about tapering. And then other than that, kind of a quiet week.
All right. Well,
happy 4th of July.
Yes, happy 4th of July, everybody. Well, guys, it was great to see you. Always fun to be back with the crew.
Great to see you too, Megan.
Do it again soon, and have a great holiday weekend, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today and listening to the HPS Macrocast. Again, I'm Meghan Pennington with Hamilton Place Strategies. Thanks to John Fagan and Brendan Walsh of Markets Policy Partners. Have a great weekend and talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.